Who do you think is better at handling crises and why? Biden or Trump?
Well, Trump was president during COVID, and so like you can grade him on how he handled that. I mean, it's an unprecedented virus and all that, but I do think, even though I don't like the way that different local municipalities went, that giving it to the local governments was a better option because you could have different governments experiment on what policies they wanted to implement. So Florida had a relatively limited lockdown. Places like New York had a severe lockdown. And you can see the consequences of that, not just in terms of the virus, but the post-economic consequences of that. People leaving certain cities, like the city of New York, that lost something like 400,000 residents, not to dying from the virus, but due to people just wanting to move out. California being a net population loser for the first time. So we could see each of these individual states and their laboratories of innovation at work. And I feel like, and the real options at the time were going to be Hillary or Biden. But I think Biden, with this new virus and that new opportunity, would have went for a more national top-down approach. So that being said, honestly, governors handled it better, in my opinion, than President Trump did, because there wasn't like a ton of national direction on it.
Yeah, I think we've seen a number of emergencies internationally and domestically, and I think that when it came time for Biden to handle things, I'm pleasantly surprised that I think Biden has done an exceptionally good job at building coalition and consensus. Domestically, it doesn't really count as emergencies, but when we talk about legislation, Biden has passed more major legislation than anybody thought he'd be able to with a 50-50 Congress. When it comes to it being an international leader, I think that Biden's efforts to shore up the feelings of all of our NATO countries to get them to contribute more than us to Ukraine, I think was amazing. Biden did a really good job at coalition building. He did a really good job in decisions relating to the declassification of intelligence to keep track on Russian moves. And he's done a really good job at making sure that the Ukraine project, learning from our mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan, was one that the entire friendly U.S. world was on board with, and not something that was just a U.S.-led mission with no clear defining factors or goals. I would say the same thing is happening in Israel, where Biden is walking an incredibly fine line of saying that we are going to be a strong ally to Israel, but Biden has been a very strong check on the amount of destruction that's happening in the Gaza Strip right now because of his check on Israel. So, for instance, Israel delayed their invasion into Gaza. Israel was encouraged to allow humanitarian aid in, and Israel has been encouraged to, with severe pressure from the Biden administration, to dramatically curtail or limit or be careful of the amount of civilian destruction, with explicit warning from the United States that you are going to lose support if you act in a reckless manner. Internationally, that was fine. Domestically, I mean, if we look at the differences in COVID, it's hard to compare, obviously, because you had one before and one after. But Biden, what did he promise? In 100 days, he would have how many vaccines rolled out? He had it done in 48 or 52 days. Biden worked to make sure that almost every American, I think it was 90% of Americans in the country were within 1 mile from a COVID vaccine distribution center, which was amazing. I think that when we looked at Donald Trump's response under COVID, I think it was an unmitigated failure. He wasn't a leader. He denied it was a problem for so long. He had an inability to get people to come together to create PPE. He had fightings all over his administration. There was no coordinated national level response for how things should be handled. Instead, it was done state by state, which was a fucking disaster. And we can even see when we look into the red districts, the districts that voted for Trump and the districts that voted for Biden, the ones that had the higher fatality rates, the ones that dealt with more COVID that dealt with more COVID issues, all of them were states that voted for Trump. And the go-to excuse is always, well, those people are older, which, by the way, is more of a reason for them to be more stringent. But also, when you adjusted for age, they still had higher fatality rates because they weren't getting vaccinated and they weren't enacting any of the measures that would have kept them safe from any disease transactions. So I think and then look at the George Floyd riots. I mean, what was it? We had some federal police that were arresting people in some states. We had Donald Trump stoking the flames. Look at January 6th, right? You had Donald Trump with the ability to shut that down at any point in time, stewing on his fucking bed, probably watching reruns of Good Morning America or whatever in his fucking bathrobe. Donald Trump has not been a leader on any of the crises that have occurred in the United States ever. He hasn't been a leader in any international crises that's occurred ever. He's just a fucking loser. I don't know what else to say. Yeah.